Now, of course, as we mentioned, one of the first things that we need to do to be sure that we maintain user responsiveness is to, know where any potentially blocking tasks are, right? In other words, we don't want to do things on the main application thread that actually tie the user up. And, it sounds like a silly thing. It's kind of like, well, of course, I'll be careful. I won't do things like file system operations, or I won't do things like network operations. But the problem is, again, is that as applications become more sophisticated, we write less and less of the code ourselves, right? We're relying more and more on APIs, right? And there's may be APIs from Google, they may be APIs from third parties, they may be APIs from other teams in your own development group. So, you can't always be sure. Again, one that always jumps out at me is that simple thing like reverse geocoding an address, right? It's one line of code. How expensive can it be? Well, it actually boils down to, 20 lines of network code sort of thing. So we want to know when those things happen, right? We want to be sure that we don't introduce that stuff into our applications. So to help us with that, Android, starting with 2.3 release, has a class now called strict mode. And what strict mode does for us is it allows us to control what we want to have happen in our application when potentially blocking tasks occur. In other words, it's a debugging tool. What it allows us to do, we can add instructions to our program to tell the platform to say, you know what? If certain kinds of operations occur, I want to know, right? And what I want to know means can mean many different things. It can mean something as simple as write it to a log file. It might mean crash the program. This is so important. I want to just go ahead and crash the program if these sort of things happen. And so what it really allows us to do is really just introduce a level of debugging. Detecting this sort of thing is expensive, so you only want to do it when you're actually in debug mode or in development mode. And all we really need to do is create an instance of this class called strict mode and then kind of give instructions about what we want to have happen. Now, there's a lot of nuances to strict mode, so I'm just going to bring up the documentation page for it here real quick. You notice that we've got this strict mode here, and if we look through the documentation here, it says, well, there's set thread policy, set VM policy. What that means is that set thread policy is that, well, these are the rules I want to set for the current thread. Set VM policy is the rules I want to set for every thread running inside the VM. And you notice here you got all these things. Well, I want to detect disk reads. I want to detect disk writes. I want to detect network activity. Right? What I want to have happen. What I want to write it to the log file. Right? You get down here, I want to write the log file, but I also want to crash the program when that happens. Right? So we have all these things, and if you go through the docs, there's a lot of control over this. The thing is that most of us don't want that kind of detailed control. The bottom line is that we just want to make sure that we're not doing anything on our main application thread that's going to be bad for the user. And so for that reason, there's actually a very simple way to use strict mode, which is something called enable defaults.